Imagine a room, right? Just a massive room filled with people who fundamentally, and I mean like perhaps even aggressively disagree with one another.
Okay, I can picture that.
Yeah. So half the room looks at the world and sees systems that need to be, completely dismantled, reformed right now.
Right. High urgency.
Exactly. And then the other half looks at those exact same systems and they truly believe that changing them will just unravel the very fabric of society.
Like total chaos.
Total chaos. They read the exact same news, they look at the exact same facts, and they arrive at completely contradictory, deeply held moral conclusions.
Which, I mean, that just sounds like the internet on any given Tuesday, right?
Right. But here's the wild part. Now, imagine those same people still holding all of those fiercely opposed views, walking up to a table, kneeling down shoulder to shoulder, drinking from the exact same cup, and reciting the exact same words together in total unison.
Wow. I mean, it sounds almost like science fiction in our current cultural climate.
It really does.
It just completely defies the modern expectation of how human beings are supposed to behave when they disagree.
Exactly, because usually when we talk about a massive human institution or, resolving a deep conflict, there's this expectation of engineering precision.
Right, like a formula.
Yeah. You find the problem, you write a clear rule to fix it, you draw a hard line in the sand, and the leader just points and says, there it is. This is exactly what we believe, and if you don't agree, well, there's the door.
Yeah, we are heavily conditioned to think in binaries today.
Yeah.
You are either in or you are out. It's clean, it's mathematically satisfying.
Clean and so comforting. I mean, we really like things to be visible, to be strictly categorized.
Oh, absolutely.
But then you step into the world of human belief, of 500-year-old institutions, of theology and community, and suddenly that clean engineering blueprint is entirely useless.
Yeah, it goes out the window.
Completely out the window. We are looking at a landscape that is, well, honestly, it's incredibly murky.
It is the absolute definition of muddy waters, which, paradoxically, is precisely what makes it so enduring.
Welcome to the deep dive. For you listening right now, the learner, the person who is always asking why, we have a fascinating mission today.
We really do.
We are unpacking a massive stack of research, historical documents, and theological frameworks, all centered on Anglican and Episcopal Christianity.
And we should probably be crystal clear right up front.
Yes, absolutely. This is not just a Sunday school history lesson.
Not at all.
Whether you are studying how global corporations function or looking into the psychology of conflict resolution, or you are just, insanely curious about how any tradition evolves and survives centuries of war and social upheaval, this topic is an absolute goldmine.
It really is.
Yeah.
And what's fascinating here, at least through my analytical lens, is how this specific tradition deliberately engineered what they call a middle way between polarizing extremes.
The middle way, yeah.
Right. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, the concept of a designed middle way is just incredibly relevant to how we handle information, polarization, and community today.
Oh, 100%.
It asks a fundamental, almost terrifying question, which is, how do you keep people together when they completely disagree on the details?
Okay, so let's unpack this, because to actually understand how they answer that question, we have to look at how this whole thing started, and the details are wild.
They really are.
I mean, historically, the popular narrative is basically a soap opera.
Yeah, it's very dramatic.
How did a royal temper tantrum over a divorce turn into a global philosophical movement? We have to go back to 16th century England, right in the middle of the Protestant Reformation.
We do. And the defining inciting incident, the date that always gets circled in the history books, is the 1534 Act of Supremacy.
1534, okay.
Right. This is the moment King Henry VIII effectively separates the English Church from the authority of the Pope in Rome.
Wow.
Yeah, he declares himself, the English monarch, as the supreme head of the Church of England.
So on paper, to the casual observer, it just looks like a massive, incredibly arrogant political power grab.
That's exactly how it looks.
Like Henry wants a divorce from Catherine of Aragon because she hasn't given him male heir.
Right.
And the Pope, who is under intense political pressure from Catherine's very powerful family in Europe, just says no.
He does.
So Henry just throws his hands up and says, fine, I'll make my own church where I make the rules.
And that is the most common misunderstanding. Outsiders, and honestly, even a lot of History Channel documentaries often look at this and think, oh, it's just Catholicism without the Pope.
Right.
Or they assume it was purely Henry's political maneuver. But when you really dig into the historical context from our sources, you realize Anglicanism is not simply a political break that happened in a vacuum.
Okay, so there's more to it.
Much more.
Yeah.
Yes, Henry initiated the formal fracture, but there were intense brewing tensions that had been building for generations.
What kind of tensions? Because, I mean, if the Pope says no, usually a king just has to deal with it, right?
Well, not exactly. There was a major structural authority conflict between the English monarchy and the papacy that severely predated Henry's marital issues.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Keep in mind, the Church in Rome wasn't just a spiritual guide back then. It was a massive political and economic entity.
Like a corporation.
Almost exactly like one. Monasteries and church properties accounted for a huge percentage of the land and wealth in England.
Wow.
The Pope could levy taxes, appoint powerful bishops, and even operate a completely separate legal system within England.
A separate legal system.
Yeah. So English kings had been chafing against that foreign intervention for centuries. Henry's divorce was really just the spark that hit a very large, very dry pile of geopolitical kindling.
Okay, so the soil was already incredibly fertile for a rebellion against Rome, just from a purely financial and sovereign standpoint.
Absolutely.
But it wasn't just politics, right? Because you also have the Protestant Reformation happening at the exact same time on the continent.
Precisely. You have the growing, creeping influence of Protestant reform movements sweeping across Europe. Think Martin Luther in Germany, John Calvin in Geneva.
Right, the big names.
Exactly. And these ideas were smuggling their way across the English Channel.
Let's pause for the listener who might be, a bit rusty on their 16th century European history.
Sure.
When we say Protestant reform ideas, what are we actually talking about? What was so radical that it was tearing Europe apart?
The core of the Protestant Reformation was a fundamental challenge to how a human being connects with God.
Okay.
The medieval Catholic system relied heavily on the institutional church as the mediator. The priests, the Pope, the Latin Mass, the buying of indulgences. The church was basically the gatekeeper of salvation.
Right, you had to go through them.
Exactly. But the Protestant reformers argued for radical changes. Most notably, this idea of Scripture alone, the idea that the Bible, not the Pope, is the ultimate authority,
Wow.
and that it should be translated into languages ordinary people could actually read.
Which was huge back then.
Earth-shattering. They also pushed the concept of justification by faith, which essentially means you are saved by your personal faith in God's grace, not by, performing specific rituals or buying your way into heaven through the institutional church.
So you have these massive disruptive theological ideas seeping into the groundwater of England right at the exact moment Henry VIII decides he wants to kick the Pope out of the country for his own selfish reasons.
Exactly. It's a perfect storm. Henry's political break essentially opened the floodgates for those theological ideas to take root.
Even though Henry probably didn't even like those ideas.
Oh, he hated them. Henry actually hated a lot of Protestant theology and remained fairly Catholic in his personal beliefs until he died.
That is wild.
It is. But the true architects of what we now call Anglicanism, the people who actually built the philosophy, were the ones who came after Henry.
Okay, who were they?
Specifically, Thomas Cranmer, who was the Archbishop of Canterbury, and later, Queen Elizabeth I.
Okay, I was reading through the historical accounts of this transition in our source stack, and I kept trying to picture it dynamically.
Yeah.
And the best way I can conceptualize it is like a massive corporate merger, or really a hostile takeover.
Oh, I like that.
It's like the CEO, Henry VIII, initiates a hostile takeover purely for his own personal benefit. He wants the axes, he wants to consolidate power, he wants the board of directors out of his way.
Right.
But the head of HR, that's Thomas Cranmer, sees the sheer chaos of this transition. And Cranmer uses that chaos to secretly, and then eventually not so secretly, rewrite the entire company culture, the mission statement, and the daily operations from the ground up.
That is a brilliant analogy. Cranmer was incredibly strategic.
He had to be, right?
Oh, yeah. While Henry was alive, Cranmer had to tread very, very carefully. But once Henry died, Cranmer began systematically embedding Protestant theological DNA into the English church. And to take your corporate analogy a step further, Queen Elizabeth I comes in a few years later as the new CEO and permanently stabilizes that new culture with what's called the Elizabethan religious settlement.
Why did it need stabilizing, though? Was it really that volatile?
Oh, it was incredibly bloody and volatile.
Really?
Yeah. After Henry died, his son Edward took over and pushed the country into radical, extreme Protestantism.
Oh,
They
yeah.
smashed stained glass windows, destroyed statues, they stripped the altars bare. It was intense.
Wow, just total destruction of the old way.
Exactly. But then Edward died young, and Henry's daughter Mary, often called Bloody Mary, took the throne.
I've heard of her.
Right. She was fiercely Catholic. She entirely reversed course, brought England back under the Pope, and started burning Protestants at the stake.
Including Thomas Cranmer himself, right?
Yes, including Thomas Cranmer.
Wow. So within a single generation, the English people experienced severe ideological whiplash.
Whiplash is the perfect word for it.
Radical Protestantism followed by brutal, hardline Catholicism. It was a societal pendulum swinging wildly and violently.
Exactly. So when Queen Elizabeth V finally takes the throne, she looks at the landscape of Europe, which is literally tearing itself apart in religious civil wars.
Just burning down.
Yeah, and she looks at her own bleeding, exhausted country. What Elizabeth and her advisors realized was just profound.
What did they realize?
They realized that to avoid endless bloodshed and total state collapse, they couldn't just mash two opposing views together, and they couldn't just violently enforce one extreme over the other.
They needed to thread the needle.
Precisely.
They wanted church reform. I mean, they couldn't go back to the corruption that sparked the Reformation, but they didn't want to burn the whole historical house down to get it.
Exactly. You can't just rewrite a deeply ingrained culture by telling people everything they and their ancestors did for the last 1,000 years was entirely wrong and, demonic.
Right. People won't stand for that.
No. You have to build a new foundation that feels aesthetically and emotionally familiar, but operates on a different philosophical software.
A different philosophical software. I love that.
Yeah. And that leads directly to the core philosophy of the movement. They constructed something entirely new by drawing from three distinct streams.
Right. This is the concept of the via media, the middle way. Let's break down these three streams.
Let's do it.
First, it pulls from Roman Catholic tradition. So visually and structurally, they kept a lot of the Catholic framework.
They did.
They kept the bishops, they kept this structured liturgy, the choreographed way the service flows, and they kept the sacraments.
Yes. And let me just pause on that word, sacraments, because it's vital.
Okay, break it down.
In Christian theology, a sacrament is understood as a visible sign of an inward spiritual grace. Think of baptism with water or the Eucharist communion with bread and wine.
Got it.
Radical Protestants wanted to strip these down to purely symbolic acts, just memory exercises, nothing more.
Like just going through the motions to remember something.
Right. But the Catholic view was that a profound, literal, almost magical transformation happened. The Via Media kept the deep, mysterious reverence for the sacraments without demanding everyone agree on the exact medieval physics of how the bread and wine transformed.
Okay, so stream one is that historical Catholic tradition and reverence.
Right.
Stream two is Protestant theology. They brought in the absolute primacy of Scripture, the idea that the Bible is the ultimate lens.
Yes.
And that concept of justification by faith, that you can't buy or earn God's love.
Correct. And the third stream is the early church.
The early church.
Yeah. They essentially bypassed the medieval corruptions of Rome and looked way back to the first few centuries of Christianity, the ancient creeds and councils.
Trying to find the original source code.
Exactly. To find a pure baseline of what Christians originally agreed upon before all the institutional bloating occurred.
So they are weaving together Catholic structure, Protestant theology, and ancient Christian roots.
Right. And if we look closely at how those three streams interact, we start to see the psychological genius of the Via Media.
Okay.
Let's contrast it with the extremes of that era. On one side, you had Roman Catholicism, which was highly centralized.
Right.
The Pope is the supreme, unquestionable authority. The magisterium dictates the doctrine, and it is fixed. It is a strict, top-down hierarchy.
Right. Rome has spoken. The case is closed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, on the other side, you had Protestant evangelicalism, which emphasized Scripture alone.
Oh, okay.
It rejected historical hierarchy and centralized authority entirely. But the unintended consequence of Scripture alone, without a unifying authority, is heavy fragmentation.
Because everyone reads it differently.
Because human beings read texts differently.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if you put 10 people in a room with a complex text and tell them their individual interpretation is the ultimate authority, you're going to get 10 different philosophies within an hour.
And that is exactly what happened to Protestantism. Without a central authority, it splintered into countless different denominations, sects, and subsects.
It's breaking apart.
Constantly. All with conflicting interpretations of the Bible, often going to war with one another over those exact interpretations.
So you have absolute, rigid, centralized authority on one side and chaotic, splintered fragmentation on the other.
And the psychological comfort of the via media is that it consciously rejects both of those extremes.
Yeah, it says no to both.
Right. It rejects absolute authoritarianism, but it also rejects chaotic fragmentation. It says we are going to preserve unity, but we refuse to do it by being theological dictators.
And to actually mechanize that, to make it work in practice, they built what is essentially the operating system of Anglicanism.
Yes, the famous stool.
Right. It's often referred to as the three-legged stool of authority, and I just love a good structural metaphor.
It's a great one.
The three legs are scripture, tradition, and reason. So instead of authority coming just from one guy in Rome or just from an isolated reading of the Bible, it comes from the dynamic, constant interaction of all three.
Let's define the parameters of that stool, because it is brilliant.
Please.
Scripture is the foundational text. It is the primary lens. Tradition is the historical wisdom of the church over centuries. How did the people before us understand this text? What did they learn through trial and error?
Right, so not reinventing the wheel every generation.
Exactly. And reason is the human intellect. It is the God-given ability to think critically, to observe the natural world, to incorporate new scientific discoveries, and to apply logic and context to the other two legs.
Okay, I need to stop you there.
Sure.
I'm putting myself in the shoes of someone trying to actually use this stool to sit down and make a decision. And I'm going to push back on this.
Go for it.
Because structurally, doesn't a three-legged stool completely wobble or just collapse if one leg is shorter or longer than the others?
Give me an example of what you mean.
Let's take a modern ethical issue. Let's say is bioethics or the social shifts around gender and sexuality over the last 50 years.
Okay, complex issues.
Right. If scripture written thousands of years ago seems to say one thing, but 2,000 years of tradition says another, and my modern 21st century reason, informed by modern psychology and biology, points to a third completely different conclusion. Who actually wins?
That's the million-dollar question.
How does a church make a ruling? Doesn't this middle way risk becoming incredibly wishy-washy? Like if you try to constantly balance three competing forces, you end up standing for absolutely nothing.
That is the sharpest, most common critique of Anglicanism, both historically and from other Christian groups today.
Oh, really? So people say that all the time?
All the time. They look at the Anglican Communion and say exactly that. You compromise too much, you lack conviction, just pick a side.
Pick a side, yeah.
But from the inside of the tradition, the tension between those three legs isn't a bug in the software. The tension is the point.
Wait, the goal is to be in tension. That sounds exhausting.
It can be. But if we connect this to how human beings actually live, very few complex moral, ethical, or philosophical issues have clean, binary, black and white answers. Life is not a standardized math test.
That's true. The moment you think you have a perfect moral rule, reality throws a wildly complex human situation at you that breaks the rule.
Exactly. And Anglicanism defines faith not by achieving absolute belief clarity or flawless doctrinal precision.
Okay.
It defines faith by faithful participation while allowing for ambiguity. The tension between scripture, tradition, and reason creates a structural space where doubt is actually tolerated.
Doubt is tolerated. That's big.
Huge. It acknowledges that human understanding is limited. We might not have the perfect exact answer right this second, but we are committed to figuring it out together, using all the tools available to us. The ancient texts, the wisdom of our ancestors, and our own modern brains.
Wow.
It makes a profoundly intellectually honest space for seekers.
That is a massive shift in perspective, right? You're saying they don't view uncertainty as a sin. They view it as a necessary component of seeking truth.
Exactly.
I was looking at how they apply this to ethics, and the framework is often described as case-based moral reasoning.
Yes.
Instead of rigid, universal moral rules like thou shalt never do X under any circumstance ever, Anglican theologians encourage discernment within a community. They take pastoral context into account.
Context is everything for them.
Right. They look at the specific human beings involved in a complex ethical dilemma and apply the three-legged stool to that specific case. It's flexible.
It is flexible, but it isn't formless. And that's the crucial distinction that prevents the stool from collapsing.
How so?
The reason it doesn't just devolve into total relativism, where everyone just does whatever they want, is because they're having these intense debates within a deeply structured, shared environment.
Okay, but this brings up the most glaring practical problem.
Which is?
How do you keep people together if the system explicitly allows them to disagree on the details? I mean, if I am sitting in the pew and I think reason should win out on a specific social issue, and the person sitting right next to me thinks tradition should firmly overrule reason, Why don't we just argue, split, and form two different churches?
Which is human nature.
That's what usually happens in human history. Look at political parties, look at corporate splits. When people disagree, they leave.
And this brings us to what is unarguably the most unique, beautiful, and defining feature of the entire Anglican tradition.
Oh, I'm ready for this.
The answer to how they stay together when their theology diverges lies not in what they think, but in how they pray.
Yes. This is where we get into the Latin principle that completely blew my mind.
Let's hear it.
Lex orandi, lex credendi.
There it is.
The law of prayer is the law of belief. I had to sit and think about that phrase for a long time because it totally flips the script on how modern Westerners operate.
It really does.
We usually think that you figure out what you believe first, in your head. You get your intellectual theology straight, you decide your moral stances, and then you go find a church or a political party or a community that perfectly matches your pre-existing theology. Belief first, action second.
Right. Do they align with my personal brand?
Exactly.
But Anglicanism reverses that completely.
Yeah.
Lex orandi, lex credendi argues that how you worship, the physical and spoken actions you take, actually shape and form what you believe over time.
Wow.
It prioritizes shared practice over ideological uniformity.
Meaning, two Anglicans can fiercely, vehemently disagree on a piece of complex theology or a modern political issue, but on Sunday morning they will stand next to each other.
Yes.
They will read the exact same historic prayers out loud together. They will walk up to the altar rail, kneel side by side, and take the exact same Eucharist, the communion, together. The shared action supersedes the intellectual disagreement.
Exactly. And this is the brilliant legacy of Thomas Cranmer's masterpiece, the Book of Common Prayer, which was first published in 1549.
Right, the HR guy's new manual.
Exactly. It was utterly revolutionary because its primary goal wasn't to write a dense, philosophical textbook of theology that everyone had to pass a multiple-choice test on to prove they were orthodox.
Okay.
It was a script for shared action.
Explain why it was so revolutionary, though. Like, what was happening before 1549?
Before the Book of Common Prayer, church services in England were conducted in Latin.
Which nobody spoke.
Right. The priests faced away from the congregation, speaking a language the average farmer or blacksmith couldn't understand, performing rituals that felt mysterious and distant.
Just totally disconnected.
Cranmer took the liturgy, translated it into soaring, poetic, beautiful English, and gave it to the people.
Wow.
He designed it so that the congregation actually had to respond and participate. The book was intended to physically and verbally unite the church, and by extension, the entire fractured English nation, through shared language and ritual.
Pray the same way, using the same words, even if our individual brains are interpreting the theological nuances differently. It's profound. And the cultural influence of Cranmer's work is staggering. I mean, even if a listener has never set foot inside a church in their entire life, they know Cranmer's words. Phrases we use every single day in modern English come directly from the Book of Common Prayer.
Oh, it shaped the English language almost as much as Shakespeare did.
Absolutely. Till death do us part in wedding vows.
Yep.
Ashes to ashes, dust to dust at funerals, earth to earth. These phrases weren't just written as nice poetry, they were engineered to be spoken aloud by communities of people who were actively going through the most profound, agonizing, and joyous moments of human life and death together.
And it isn't just about those major life events, the weddings and funerals. The real power of the lex orandi principle is found in the daily and weekly grind of life.
The grind, yeah.
Anglican spirituality is built around deep, repetitive cycles of time. It relies on a specific rhythm.
Break that rhythm down for us. What does it actually look like in practice?
It operates on 3 distinct levels of time. First, you have the daily rhythm. This is morning prayer and evening prayer. These are structured short services of reading psalms and specific prayers that literally bookend the day.
Very structured.
Then you have the weekly rhythm, which centers on the Sunday Eucharist, the gathering of the community to take communion.
Got it.
And finally, you have the yearly liturgical rhythm. They don't just experience time as a flat calendar, they move through spiritual seasons.
Like Advent.
Right. You have the quiet anticipation of Advent, the celebration of Christmas, the somber reflection and fasting of Lent, the explosive joy of Easter, and the empowerment of Pentecost.
So what does this all mean for the average person sitting in the pews or, someone trying to understand the psychology of this group?
Yeah, how does it feel?
The analogy that keeps coming to my mind is a large, incredibly opinionated family.
I like this.
It sounds like a family that constantly bickers over politics, economics, and worldviews. But no matter how bad the argument gets on a Tuesday, They have a strict, non-negotiable rule. They insist on having a highly choreographed, formal Sunday dinner together every single week. They set the table the same way, they pass the food the same way, they say the same grace.
Right.
And the physical act of the dinner, the passing of the bread, the simply being in the same room, is what fundamentally makes them a family, not their voting records.
That is a perfect, deeply human way to visualize it. And if we analyze the psychology of that rhythm, it reveals a massive difference in how this tradition views human transformation compared to others.
How so?
Well, in many religious traditions, particularly in modern evangelical Protestantism, there is a heavy psychological emphasis on a sudden, dramatic, one-time conversion
Oh,
experience.
right. An emotional turning point where everything changes in an instant, like the born-again moment. The lightning bolt from the sky where you suddenly see the light, cry at the altar, and you are a completely new person.
Yes, that instantaneous transformation is highly valued in many traditions. But Anglicanism, with its focus on the Book of Common Prayer and the liturgical calendar, relies on a totally different psychological mechanism.
Which is?
It relies on the psychology of gradual habituation.
Gradual habituation.
Right. Faith in this tradition isn't necessarily a lightning bolt. It is lived through slow, gradual, almost imperceptible formation. It is about building spiritual muscle memory.
Muscle memory. I love that, like an athlete or a musician.
Exactly like that. You say the prayers daily, even when you don't feel like it. You take the Eucharist weekly, even if you're struggling with doubt.
Just doing the reps.
Doing the reps. You observe the physical fasting of Lent and the celebrations of Easter yearly. You don't do it because you already possess perfect faith. You do it because the repetition shapes you.
Wow.
Over years and decades, those repeated physical and verbal actions slowly carve out your character and your worldview. It's not the explosive blast of a lightning bolt. It's the slow, relentless carving of a canyon by a river over 1,000 years.
Which naturally attracts a very specific type of personality. I mean, this isn't a tradition for someone who wants constant, unpredictable emotional highs.
Definitely not.
I want to shift gears and look at the psychological worldview of the tradition, because the historical notes we have dive deeply into how Anglicanism views human nature itself. And honestly, it's remarkably moderate.
It is the via media applied to the human soul.
Exactly. It says that humans are fundamentally created good. We aren't garbage, but we are fallen through sin.
Right.
And it's interesting how they define sin here. It's not just breaking rules. It's defined as alienation from God, pride, and self-centeredness. So we are good, we are deeply flawed and alienated, but we are entirely capable of redemption and growth through grace.
Notice what it consciously rejects there.
What's that?
It rejects the extreme pessimism of some theological branches like strict Calvinism. They view humans as utterly depraved, essentially worthless, completely unable to do any good without divine intervention forcing them to.
Right.
But it also rejects the blind, naive optimism of the Enlightenment. The idea that humans are inherently perfect and just need a little more education or a better political system to create a utopia.
It sits right in the middle. We are beautiful and we are broken.
The middle way. And because they view humans as complex, in-between creatures, the virtues the tradition values most highly aren't zealous purity or radical fanaticism.
What are they?
The highest virtues are humility, charity, faithfulness, wisdom, and above all, balance, moderation, and reflection.
And this brings us to a really fascinating psychological profile mentioned in our source stack. There is a framework that maps religious traditions to different personality types, and it highlights a specific subpersonality called the Val persona.
Ah, yes, the Val persona.
Yes. I wanted to bring this up because it makes so much sense when you look at the culture of this church. For you listening, let's define this framework quickly.
Go for it.
The Val persona is a psychological archetype defined by ambition, a deep appreciation for discipline, a desire for competence, and a natural draw toward mastery. Val is the kind of person who respects institutions, values strategic thinking, and operates on what is called the climb philosophy, the idea that you achieve integrity and success through steady, structured progression.
If you think about the Val persona, someone who doesn't want chaotic emotionalism, but wants a structured path to mastery Anglicanism is a perfect, almost custom-built fit.
Why is that?
Because Anglican spirituality is not chaotic devotion. It isn't just an unstructured outpouring of raw emotion where everyone does whatever they feel in the moment. It is deeply, beautifully ordered.
Right, the prayer book.
Exactly. It is ritualistic. It requires disciplined, incremental growth over time.
It perfectly parallels that climb philosophy, the steady progression through the church calendar, the daily reading of the offices. It gives an ambitious, disciplined mind a robust framework to operate within.
Exactly. The intellectual tradition of the three-legged stool specifically rewards strategic thinking and reason. It doesn't ask you to check your brain at the door.
No, you get to keep your brain.
And the balance between tradition and reform perfectly mirrors Val's desire to challenge flawed systems and improve them, while still deeply respecting historical heritage and institutional stability. It offers profound depth without demanding blind, anti-intellectual submission.
And you can see the results of that intellectual, disciplined appeal in the sheer cultural output it produced. I mean, when you look at history, we were talking about a tradition that birthed some of the heaviest intellectual and artistic hitters in Western civilization.
Oh, without a doubt.
The Anglican tradition produced literary giants like C.S. Lewis, T.S. Eliot, John Donne, Jane Austen.
Huge, James.
And the roots of massive, world-changing educational institutions like Oxford and Cambridge are deeply, inextricably intertwined with Anglican theology and structure.
And we absolutely cannot ignore the aesthetic expression of this worldview, because Anglicanism holds a theological belief that physical beauty can actually reveal the divine. The cultural output is staggering.
Right, they didn't just smash all the stained glass forever.
No, they didn't strip the altars bare permanently. They poured their discipline into Gothic architecture, intricate storytelling, stained glass, and sacred art.
And the music.
Oh, the music. The tradition of massive cathedral pipe organs and incredibly complex, mathematically beautiful choral music composers like Thomas Tallis or Ralph Vaughan Williams.
It's just gorgeous.
The aesthetic experience isn't just decoration. It is designed to invite contemplation and reflect that ordered, disciplined beauty of the universe.
Okay, I hear all of that. C.S. Lewis, Oxford, Gothic cathedrals, Thomas Tallis choral arrangements. It sounds incredibly beautiful.
It is.
But I have to push back here, or at least play devil's advocate on behalf of the listener.
Okay, what's the pushback?
If the tradition appeals so heavily to intellectuals, to lovers of high Gothic architecture and pipe organs, to highly disciplined, highly educated people who like reading T.S. Eliot in their spare time,
Right.
doesn't it ever struggle with coming across as, well, incredibly elitist? I mean, how does it maintain this idea of being a big tent for everyone if it structurally feels like an academic upper-class country club for people who appreciate 16th century English literature?
That is a very perceptive critique. And honestly, it is a reality the tradition has absolutely had to wrestle with.
So it's a real issue.
Oh, definitely. The perception of it being the frozen chosen, or purely an elite, waspy country club religion for the upper middle class, is a real historical and modern challenge.
Frozen chosen, that's funny.
Yeah. If the liturgy becomes purely an intellectual or aesthetic performance, it absolutely alienates the average person. But the reality of the Anglican big tent is actually much more complex than the stereotype.
How so?
It isn't just one monolithic high church flavor. To understand how it avoids being just a narrow elite club, we have to look at its internal diversity.
Let's do that. Because when you look at the structure today, there are three main streams or wings within the church, and they sound incredibly different from one another.
They do.
If I walk into three different Anglican churches on a Sunday, I might get three totally different experiences.
You absolutely would. First, you have the Anglo-Catholic stream.
This is the one that is very close to Roman Catholic worship, right?
Yes.
We are talking bells, heavy clouds of incense, priests in incredibly elaborate vestments, chanting, and a very strong mystical theology around the Eucharist.
Very high sensory experience.
Right. If I walked into an Anglo-Catholic church, I might not even realize I wasn't in a traditional Roman Catholic Mass until I noticed, the priest was a married woman.
Precisely. The Anglo-Catholic wing leans very heavily on the tradition leg of the stool. They emphasize the mystery, the sacraments, and the historical continuity with the ancient church. The sensory experience is paramount.
Okay, and the second stream,
Then on the other end of the spectrum, you have the evangelical Anglican stream.
which is much more Protestant in its flavor.
Exactly.
Simpler services, maybe contemporary music instead of a pipe organ, a massive focus on the sermon and biblical preaching, and a heavy emphasis on personal conversion and scripture.
They lean very heavily on the scripture leg of the stool. The aesthetics are stripped back to focus on the spoken word.
And then the third one,
And then in the middle, you have what is historically called the broad church.
moderate, intellectually open. They tend to emphasize the social implications of the gospel, social justice, community outreach, and philosophical reflection.
Right.
I'm guessing they lean pretty heavily on the reason leg of the stool, engaging deeply with modern culture and science.
Yes. They are often the ones pushing the boundaries of how the church interacts with modern societal shifts. And what is absolutely vital to grasp here is that all three of these streams, the incense-swinging Anglo-Catholics, the Bible-preaching evangelicals, and the social justice broad church members, all exist within the exact same tradition.
Wait, really? Under the same umbrella?
Yes, they are all Anglicans. They all use variations of the Book of Common Prayer. They all answer to the same bishops.
Wow. The structural container is strong enough to hold all three of those radically different expressions.
It is.
Okay, so that answers the elitism question locally. It's not just one flavor of high church intellectualism. But here is the next massive, unavoidable hurdle.
Here we go.
We spent this entire time talking about how it started in England, how it shaped the English language, and how it holds these different English streams together. But this isn't just an English church anymore, is it?
Not at all. And this is where the historical narrative takes a dramatic global turn.
How global?
Well, Anglicanism spread entirely through the vehicle of the British Empire. As Britain expanded its colonial reach across the globe, they took the Book of Common Prayer and their bishops with them.
Oh, of course.
They established churches in North America, Australia, India, and across the continent of Africa.
Right, and occasionally that caused massive political headaches.
Oh, major headaches.
For example, in the United States, after the American Revolution, the American Anglicans had a huge problem. You can't really have the King of England as the supreme head of your church when you literally just fought a bloody war to kick him and his taxes out of your country.
Exactly. So the American branch had to sever its legal ties with the English monarchy while keeping the theology and the bishops.
And that's how we did the Episcopal Church.
Right. That is how it became the Episcopal Church in the United States, an autonomous, self-governing province that is still part of the global Anglican family.
But the modern demographic reality is the truly staggering part.
It is.
Historically, the wealth, the power, and the population of the church were centered in England, North America, and Europe. But today, the massive, overwhelming majority of Anglicans live in the global south.
It is a profound demographic inversion. The center of gravity has shifted entirely.
I was looking at the numbers. Nigeria, Uganda, and Kenya specifically have absolutely huge Anglican populations. We are talking tens of millions of people.
Tens of millions.
There are more Anglicans in church on a Sunday morning in Nigeria than there are in all of England and North America combined.
And this massive demographic shift creates the context for the most intense, potentially existential tensions within the tradition today.
Why is that?
Because, remember our structural rules, Anglicanism is decentralized. It is a global network called the Anglican Communion. Each national church, whether it's the Episcopal Church in the U.S. or the Church of England or the Anglican Church of Nigeria, governs itself autonomously.
Wait, clarify the leadership structure then. What about the Archbishop of Canterbury? Isn't he the boss of everyone, like a pope?
No, and that is a crucial distinction. The Archbishop of Canterbury, who sits in England, is considered first among equals.
First among equals, what does that mean practically?
He is a symbolic leader, a focus of historical unity, but he is not a pope. He has no juridical power outside of England.
Oh, wow.
He cannot legally dictate policy, theology, or ethics to the Episcopal Church in the U.S. or to the Anglican Church in Uganda.
So you have these entirely autonomous national branches, all part of the same global family, all using the same historical prayer book DNA, but operating completely independently in vastly, wildly different cultural contexts.
Yes. And as we look at the sociological reality of the communion today, we see a profound structural divergence happening.
Break that down for us.
Many of the Western branches, like the Episcopal Church in the U.S., the Anglican Church of Canada, or parts of the U.K., have leaned heavily into modern social relevance.
Using the reason leg of the stool.
Utilizing that reason leg, exactly. They have adapted to progressive Western cultural contexts. They focus intensely on issues like climate responsibility, economic justice, racial reconciliation, the ordination of women as bishops, LGBTQ inclusion, and marriage equality.
Right. They're looking at the modern world, applying reason and pastoral care, and concluding that the tradition must evolve to be inclusive and socially active.
But meanwhile, the massive, rapidly growing populations in the global south, particularly in sub-Saharan Africa, often exist in entirely different cultural realities. They hold much more theologically and culturally conservative views on those exact same social issues. They are leaning heavily on the scripture and tradition legs of the stool.
So they're reading the exact same Bible.
They read the exact same Bible, they value the exact same historical traditions, but they come to fundamentally opposed conclusions regarding modern social ethics and sexuality.
So the tension we talked about earlier, the via media trying to hold opposing sides together, isn't just a quaint historical anecdote about Protestants and Catholics in the 1500s.
Not at all.
It's happening right now, today, on a massive global scale. We are basically watching a grand, high-stakes sociological experiment play out in real time.
That's exactly what it is.
Can a decentralized global communion hold together when its largest, most populated branches are moving in fundamentally different cultural and theological directions from its wealthiest, historical Western branches?
That is the existential question for the Anglican Communion in the 21st century.
It's massive.
The Middle Way was originally designed by Cranmer and Elizabeth to hold together warring factions within the borders of one small island nation.
Right, just England.
The question now is whether that same framework, the shared prayers, the historical bishops, the tolerance for ambiguity, is structurally robust enough to hold together progressive postmodern Westerners and deeply conservative traditional global South populations across the entire globe.
For you listening, I really want you to think about how incredibly rare this scenario is.
It's almost unheard of.
Most global organizations, whether we are talking about multinational corporate conglomerates, political parties, or even other massive religious groups, demand strict conformity to survive.
They do. Conform or leave.
If a regional division of a tech company fundamentally disagrees with the core ethics and operational guidelines of the parent company, they get shut down or spun off. If a political faction vehemently disagrees with the party platform, they splinter into a third party. But here is a 500-year-old institution essentially testing whether shared history, shared affection, and shared physical rituals are enough to bridge a massive modern ideological divide.
It's a huge test.
To go back to our analogy, they are trying desperately to stay at the Sunday dinner table together, eating the same meal, while fiercely arguing about the fundamental nature of what it even means to be a family in the modern world.
And that very tension is both its greatest hidden strength and the source of its most intense criticism.
How so?
From the outside, to someone demanding engineering precision, it can look like messy, weak, cowardly compromise.
Right. Like they won't take a stand.
But from the inside, it is viewed as a necessary, painful humility. It is the deep-seated belief that unity and staying in relationship with people who frustrate you is ultimately more important and more divine than being absolutely mathematically right about every single issue and isolating yourself.
As we look to wrap up this incredibly deep dive, I want to pull all of these threads together for the listener.
Let's do it.
If someone on the outside is looking at this complex, messy, beautiful, contradictory 500-year-old tradition, what are they actually taking away? In a modern world of endless choices, why do people actually convert to this today?
Based on the sociological data and theological appeal we've unpacked, people are drawn to Anglicanism today for a few very specific, highly relevant reasons.
Okay, what's the first one?
First, intellectual balance. It provides a powerful antidote to strict, rigid fundamentalism on one side and rootless anti-intellectual relativism on the other.
So the middle way.
Exactly. It offers a spiritual space where you don't have to amputate your critical thinking skills at the church door. You can bring your brain, your doubts, and your questions.
Second, I would say liturgical beauty. We live in an era that is incredibly digital, fast-paced, and disembodied.
Everything is on a screen.
Everything. The aesthetics of Anglicanism, the physical architecture, the sweeping choral music, the tactile nature of kneeling and taking bread, the slow rhythm of the ancient seasons provide a grounding, physical, embodied experience of the sacred that people are starving for.
Absolutely. Third is historical continuity. People, especially younger generations, want to feel connected to an ancient lineage.
They want roots.
They want to be part of a story that is older than the latest social media cycle, but they want that ancient connection without having to submit to an authoritarian structure. They want the moderate theology, the via media.
And finally, inclusivity. Particularly in the Western branches, it offers people the deep comfort of traditional ancient spiritual practices, the robes, the incense, the liturgy, without the social exclusion or heavy-handed judgment that sometimes accompanies more conservative theological structures.
That's a huge draw for many.
But the most vital takeaway from all of this material is that you cannot truly understand Anglicanism just by reading a book about its history or analyzing its structural stool.
No, you cannot map it out on a whiteboard and expect to understand it.
You just can't.
To understand it, you actually have to experience the practice. You have to walk into a building and attend a Eucharist. You have to physically hold the Book of Common Prayer and speak the words aloud with a group of strangers.
Physical.
It is fundamentally a lived physical experience, not a theoretical puzzle to be solved. You have to feel the psychological shift from the somber, reflective fasting of Lent to the explosive brass and choir celebration of Easter morning.
Because, to bring it all back to the center, lex orandi, lex credendi.
There it is again.
The physical action shapes and creates the internal belief. So for you listening, whether you are personally looking for a spiritual home or you are just trying to understand how massive human institutions can possibly survive centuries of turmoil, political division, and cultural shift, the Anglican Middle Way offers a profound masterclass.
A true masterclass.
It is a masterclass in balancing respect for ancient tradition with the absolute necessity of modern reform. It is a masterclass in using shared habits and rituals to build unbreakable community. And most importantly, it's a masterclass in having the sheer humility to say, we might not have all the perfect answers right now, but we are going to keep walking together in tension anyway.
And I want to leave you with a final lingering thought to mull over as you go about your day.
What is it?
We live in a hyper-modern digital age where the algorithms of our lives increasingly demand absolute ideological purity.
That is so true.
We demand it from our political parties, we demand it from our social circles, and we demand it from our online communities. If someone doesn't agree with us on every single detail, what do?
We just cut them out.
We unfriend, we block, we mute, we curate them out of our feed entirely. If the algorithm doesn't align with our exact worldview, we cancel and divide. It is that clean binary engineering mindset we talked about at the very beginning, in or out.
Right. If they don't pass the purity test, completely erase them from your reality.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But looking at the messy, sprawling, incredibly resilient 500-year Anglican experiment, you have to ask yourself a challenging question.
Oh, okay, lay it on us.
What would our modern society, our neighborhoods, our politics actually look like if we focused a little less on demanding that everyone think exactly the same way and focused a little more on finding shared, beautiful practices that we could just do together?
Wow. What a phenomenal question. Maybe the clean binary answers are an illusion and the muddy waters are exactly where we need to be. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning, keep exploring, and we will catch you next time.